There comes a moment in life when a wound refuses to close, not because time is incapable of healing, but because the mind keeps opening it again and again. Someone has hurt you, perhaps through betrayal, neglect, or cruelty, and while the world around you moves on, your heart feels trapped in a loop, reliving the pain. You tell yourself, I must forget. I must let go, but the more you try, the more their shadow lingers. Forgetting isn't an act of erasing the past, it's an act of reclaiming your present. It is not about pretending the person never existed, but about removing their power to dictate your emotions, your worth, and your future. Today, we'll walk through 5 truths that can help you release someone who has hurt you not only from your memory, but from your spirit. The first step toward healing from the wound someone has left in you is to face the truth that you cannot rewrite the past. The mind has an almost compulsive tendency to return to the scene of the pain, to wander endlessly in the corridors of memory, rearranging the furniture of events, searching for a door that might lead to a different ending. It is here that we fall into the trap of mental time travel, where the what-ifs and if-onlys become our jailers. What if I had spoken differently? What if I had acted sooner? What if I had loved better? Such questions feel urgent, as if somewhere, hidden in the folds of the past, there is a key that could unlock a happier present. But there is no such key. The past is not clay to be reshaped. It is stone, fixed and immovable. To accept this truth is not to condone what happened. It is not to say it was right, or it should have been this way. It is to acknowledge that the event occurred, that the moment is sealed, and that no amount of thought, regret, or longing will alter its shape. This is the essence of acceptance, to stand before the unchangeable and bow to its reality, without demanding it become something else. Acceptance is not surrender in the sense of defeat, it is the surrender of illusion. It is laying down the exhausting battle against what has already happened. The wound of the past is much like a scar on the skin. You may run your fingers over it and remember the injury, but the pain is no longer raw. The blood has stopped flowing. It becomes part of your story, part of your body, but not the part that defines your every step. Yet for many, the wound is never allowed to scar over, because the mind keeps reopening it, inspecting it, questioning it, even feeding it. I once knew a man whose life had been fractured by betrayal. His wife of many years had left him for another man, and in her absence she left behind a box of letters, love notes, shared dreams, promises written in her own hand. For him, these letters became both a shrine and a curse. Every few weeks he would sit alone and read them again, searching for hidden signs of her departure. He would examine each phrase, wondering if a certain word carried a double meaning, if a certain silence between sentences was the beginning of her leaving. He believed that somewhere in those pages he could find the moment where love had shifted into loss. Years passed, but the wound remained as fresh as the day she walked out. He could not move forward because his heart was still buried in the archaeology of a love gone cold. Every reading was another excavation, and each excavation reopened the ache. He thought he was searching for understanding, but in truth he was feeding the illusion that, perhaps, if he could just pinpoint the moment, he might find a way to change it, as if clarity could somehow rewrite the story. It was only when he decided to burn the letters that something in him shifted. He did not burn them in a fit of rage, nor as a gesture of vengeance. He burned them as a symbolic act of acceptance. He stood in his backyard on a quiet evening, placed the letters one by one into the fire, and watched them curl into ash. The paper turned black, then vanished into the wind, leaving only embers and smoke. As he told me later, he did not feel a sudden burst of joy or liberation. Instead, he felt an unexpected stillness, as if the weight of years had finally been set down. The act of burning did not erase the past, but it marked his willingness to stop reliving it. It was a gesture to himself. I can no longer live there. What he discovered, and what many of us resist, is that the mind's need to revisit the past is not only about grief, it is about control. We replay the pain because it gives us the illusion that, by holding on to it, we maintain power over it. But the truth is the opposite. The more tightly we grip the memory, the more it grips us. Acceptance severs this grip. It is the decision to stop negotiating with a moment that has already spoken its final word. There is a quiet courage in saying, "This is what is, and I cannot change it." It is not a passive resignation. It is an active choice to step out of the loop, to free yourself from the mental repetition that chains you to the person who hurt you. This courage does not come overnight. At first, acceptance can feel like letting go of a rope when you are still dangling over an abyss. You fear that without your hold on the memory, you will fall. But in time, you discover that the abyss was an illusion, that the rope itself was the thing keeping you suspended between past and present, never allowing your feet to touch solid ground. In the quiet space that acceptance creates, something remarkable happens. You begin to see the person who hurt you not as an omnipresent figure in your story, but as a character who once played a role and has now exited the stage. They may have left you with wounds, but they no longer direct the script. Acceptance does not mean the story is forgotten, but it changes your relationship to it. It becomes a chapter rather than the entire book. In this way, to accept that you cannot rewrite the past is to reclaim your authorship of the present. It is to take back the energy that has been endlessly invested in replaying the same scene and redirect it toward living a scene you can actually shape. The past remains where it belongs behind you, unalterable, while your eyes turn forward toward a horizon that is still unwritten. When you stop trying to change what has already been carved into time, you begin to inhabit what is here now. You begin to realize that the present moment is the only place where healing can occur. And slowly, the past loses its power, not because it has vanished, but because you no longer keep feeding it with your presence. The mind, if left unchecked, will return again and again to the same wound, circling it like a moth around a flame. It is not the wound itself that keeps us trapped, but the constant feeding of it, the endless replay of the story, the constant seeking of reminders, the quiet compulsion to look back when what we need most is to look forward. The truth is simple but difficult. Whatever you feed will grow. If you feed the hurt, it will flourish. If you feed your healing, it will flourish too. Yet many of us continue, almost unconsciously, to water the weeds of our suffering. Think of your mind as a vast and fertile garden. Seeds fall into it every day. Some are seeds of joy, others of pain. The seeds that take root and thrive are not always the ones that arrive first, but the ones we tend to. When you revisit the memories of betrayal, when you scroll through old messages, when you secretly check their social media to see what they are doing, you are not merely remembering, you are nurturing. You are giving light, water, and space to something you claim you wish would wither, and so it does not wither, it grows. It is no wonder that the person who hurt you still feels present. Though they may be physically gone, their ghost lingers in the places you allow it to live. In your thoughts, in your rituals of revisiting, in the conversations where you bring up their name, as if touching the wound will help it close. But it is not closure you are feeding, it is the loop itself, the closed circuit of pain that runs on the energy you give it. Breaking this loop is not a passive event. It will not happen simply because time passes or because you wish it would. It is a conscious act of withdrawal, a refusal to keep feeding what drains you. This requires boundaries, but not just with other people. It requires boundaries with yourself. You must decide that you will no longer visit certain places that remind you of them, that you will no longer hold on to objects that keep you tethered to the memory, that you will no longer linger in conversations that reopen the wound. This is not about pretending the past never happened. It is about refusing to give it space to keep happening inside you. If you know a path leads to quicks, and you do not keep walking it to test if it has somehow become safe, you choose another route. In the same way, when you know that a certain song, a certain photograph, or a certain online profile drags you back into the loop, you avoid it, not because you are weak, but because you are wise enough to protect your own mind. The challenge is that, at first, the loop feels almost addictive. There is a strange comfort in familiar pain, as if revisiting it keeps you close to the person, even if the connection is poisonous. But healing demands that you see this for what it is: not love, not closure, but attachment to suffering. You must replace the ritual of returning to the hurt with new rituals that build you. When the urge comes to check what they are doing, pick up a book that inspires you instead. When you find yourself lost in the same thought spiral, take a walk, breathe deeply, and let your senses anchor you in the present moment. Invest your time in learning a skill that challenges you, not because distraction alone will save you, but because every new experience is a seed planted in the soil of your mind, a seed that has the potential to grow into something stronger than the weeds. There is wisdom in the findings of neuroscience here. Studies show that when we repeatedly dwell on certain thoughts or memories, we strengthen the neural pathways connected to them, making those thoughts more dominant in our mental landscape. But when we redirect our attention consistently toward new and positive activities, we weaken those old pathways. It is not erasure, it is rewiring. Just as a well-worn trail in the forest becomes overgrown when it is no longer walked, so too can the path to your pain fade when you stop traveling it. I recall speaking with a woman who had been deeply hurt by a friend's betrayal. She would relive the moment of betrayal every night before sleep, imagining different things she could have said. She admitted she checked the friend's online accounts almost daily, hoping to see signs of remorse, or perhaps to find some evidence that the friend was unhappy. It was not until she made a pact with herself to replace every urge to check with the act of writing in a journal about her own dreams and plans that something began to shift. At first, the urge fought back. She described it as a voice calling her back to the fire. But over months, the voice grew quieter, and the energy she once spent feeding the loop was now invested in her art, her studies, and new relationships. She did not forget the betrayal, but its shadow stopped following her everywhere she went. The truth is, you cannot stop thinking about someone by force of will alone. You must give your mind something else to hold. A starving mind will eat whatever is put before it, and if you keep serving it the same poisoned meal, it will keep consuming it. But when you begin to feed it with beauty, learning, creativity, connection, the old diet of pain begins to lose its hold. There will be days when you stumble, when you find yourself back in the loop without realizing it. This is not failure, it is part of the process. The point is not to be perfect, but to persist. Every time you notice you have returned to the loop and you choose to redirect yourself, you are training your mind. You are saying, in effect, I will not let this ghost live in me forever. And one day, perhaps without noticing, you will realize that the weeds have stopped growing. The garden has changed. What once was overrun by the memory of their face, their voice, their absence, is now filled with different colors, different shapes, things you planted, tended, and grew in the space they once occupied. That is the quiet victory of refusing to feed the loop. You starve the ghost, and you nourish the living. Pain, when left unexplored, becomes a stagnant pool in the soul, dark, unmoving, and heavy. We circle it in our thoughts, staring into its depths, but never stepping into it to understand what lies beneath. And when we see our suffering only as something senseless and cruel, it hardens within us as bitterness. Bitterness is the mind's way of saying, there was no purpose in this, and therefore I cannot move on. Yet the moment we begin to ask, what did this teach me? What truth about myself has been revealed here? The water begins to stir, and the stagnant pool becomes a mirror. In that reflection, meaning takes shape, and with meaning comes a strange and unexpected kind of power. To transform pain into meaning is not to deny that you were wronged, nor to romanticize cruelty as if every wound were a gift wrapped in suffering. It is instead to recognize that life is both teacher and test, and that every encounter, whether wrapped in love or betrayal, has the potential to deepen our understanding of ourselves. Some people step into our lives as blessings. They nourish us, protect us, inspire us. Others arrive as lessons, sharp, unwelcome, and often costly. But both are valuable, for both reveal the truth of who we are and what we must become. When we look back on pain through the lens of meaning, we begin to notice that it is not only the moment of hurt that shapes us, but how we respond to it. For example, you may find that the betrayal you endured revealed a truth about the boundaries you had neglected to set, or about the way you ignored early warning signs because you feared loss more than you valued your own peace. This is not self-blame, it is self-awareness, and self-awareness, even when it comes wrapped in grief, is the seed from which freedom grows. I once knew a woman whose life was turned inside out by the betrayal of a close friend. This friend, someone she had trusted implicitly, began to spread lies about her, not small lies, but ones designed to fracture her relationships and poison her reputation. At first, the woman's heart was filled with rage. She wanted retribution. She wanted the other to feel the same humiliation she had been forced to endure. Night after night, she would imagine confrontations, arguments, scenes of vindication where truth would triumph, and the betrayer would be exposed. But the more she indulged these visions, the more tightly she was bound to the hurt. Then, slowly, a shift occurred. She began to notice something about herself. She saw that while she had always been generous with her trust, she had rarely been discerning. She gave her loyalty freely, without testing whether others had earned it. She saw how she ignored subtle red flags, the occasional cutting remark disguised as a joke. The small betrayals she had dismissed as misunderstandings. The pain she was in forced her to confront this pattern, and in doing so, it offered her a strange kind of gift, the knowledge that trust is sacred and must be given with care. In her own words, she told me, "I lost a friend, but I found myself." And this is the heart of transforming pain into meaning. The loss remains, but it is no longer only loss, it is also gain. It is a breaking that reveals something essential beneath. Her betrayal became the foundation for a new way of living, one where her trust was given more intentionally. Her boundaries were guarded more fiercely, and her circle became smaller but infinitely stronger. When you ask yourself, what did this teach me about my needs, my values, my boundaries? You begin to draw something life, giving from the very thing that tried to diminish you. You take what was meant to weaken you and turn it into armor, not so you can live in fear, but so you can live with greater wisdom. This does not mean you must see every act of cruelty as fate's design, but it does mean you have the power to decide that no pain will be wasted. If you refuse to search for meaning, the pain will keep you in its grip. It will whisper to you that you are a victim, that life is unfair, that trust is a fool's game. But when you search for meaning, you begin to see that even the most undesired chapters of your life can become sources of strength. You begin to understand that the betrayal which closed one door may have prevented you from walking into a room that was never meant for you. You realize that the heartbreak which shattered you also cleared the ground for a truer version of yourself to emerge. There is an alchemy in this process, a transmutation of emotion into insight. It is the same alchemy that turns grief into compassion for others, or failure into perseverance. Meaning transforms pain because it shifts the focus from what they did to me toward what I can do with this. It takes the center of gravity away from the person who hurt you and places it back into your own hands. But you must be willing to sit with the discomfort long enough to find that meaning. Too often we want to skip past the rawness, to bury the pain under distractions or false affirmations. But if you do not face it, you cannot learn from it. The lessons buried in suffering do not reveal themselves to those who flee too quickly. You must stand in its presence, not to glorify the hurt, but to listen to what it has come to teach you. And when you begin to extract that meaning, you will feel the bitterness drain from the wound. The scar may remain, but it will no longer throb with resentment. Instead, it will carry with it a story of growth, of self-discovery, of the moment you stopped letting the hurt define you and started letting it refine you. In this way, the people who hurt us, though they may never know it, become unwilling teachers. They teach us about the parts of ourselves we had neglected, about the value of our own boundaries, about the kind of relationships we truly deserve. And while their presence in our lives may have been painful, their role in our becoming is undeniable. To transform pain into meaning is not to erase what happened. It is to stand before the memory and say, "You may have wounded me, but you will not leave me empty-handed." It is to decide that even in loss you will seek gain. And when you do, you discover that while they may have taken something from you, they also, in a way they never intended, gave you something far more enduring yourself. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood acts of the human spirit. Many imagine it as an act of weakness, as if to forgive is to excuse, to condone, to diminish the seriousness of what has been done. Others believe it is a gift offered to the one who hurt us, as though it is something they must earn before we can hand it over. But forgiveness, in its truest form, is neither of these things. It is not a pardon for the offender. It is a release for the wounded. It is not a declaration that the wrong was right. It is a decision that you will no longer allow that wrong to define the shape of your soul. When you hold on to anger, it becomes more than a feeling, it becomes a tether. It binds you to the one who hurt you, connecting you in ways far deeper than you may realize. You may have cut them off physically, you may never speak to them again, but if they still occupy your mind, if your heart still clenches at the thought of them, they still live inside you. And in that way they still have power over you. The injustice remains, but now it is accompanied by a second wound, the one you inflict upon yourself every time you rehearse the grievance, every time you taste again the bitterness of what happened. Resentment is a poison, but it is peculiar in nature. It is brewed in your own heart, stored in your own veins, and yet you drink it daily while expecting the other to feel its effects. You replay the offense, not realizing that every repetition tightens the knot between you and them. Forgiveness is the act of cutting that knot. It is saying, "I refuse to carry your shadow inside me any longer." It is important to understand that forgiving does not erase the memory. What happened will always remain in the story of your life, but forgiveness erases the memory's control over you. The moment you forgive, you take back ownership of your emotional state. The past may still exist, but it no longer dictates your present. This is why forgiveness is not an act you perform for them. It is an act you perform for yourself. It is self-liberation. Think of it like carrying a heavy stone for miles. At first you grip it tightly because you believe it has meaning, that by carrying it you will somehow find justice or ensure that the wrong is not forgotten. But as the miles pass, your arms ache, your back strains, and your journey becomes slower, heavier. Eventually you realize that the stone is not bringing you closer to anything. It is only exhausting you. And when you set it down, you do not need to throw it at anyone to make a point. You simply choose not to carry it anymore. This is what forgiveness feels like, the lightness that comes not from erasing the event, but from releasing the burden of carrying it. I once spoke with a man who had been deeply wronged in a business partnership. His partner, someone he had trusted for over a decade, had deceived him and stolen not only money but years of work. Even after the legal battles ended, the betrayal lived on in him. He thought about it every morning. He spoke about it to anyone who would listen. And though his partner had moved on, he remained imprisoned in the same moment. When I asked if he had considered forgiveness, he scoffed. "Why should I let him off the hook?" he said. And that was the heart of his misunderstanding. Forgiveness is not letting the other off the hook. It is removing yourself from the hook entirely. In time, he came to see that his anger was not punishing the betrayer, it was punishing him. He was the one losing sleep, carrying stress, poisoning new opportunities with mistrust. Slowly, he began the process of forgiving. It was not a single dramatic moment, but a daily decision. To stop feeding the memory, to stop rehearsing the outrage, to acknowledge that justice had been sought in the only ways available, and that the rest was beyond his control. The day he finally said, "I forgive him," he did not feel the sudden warmth of compassion toward the man. What he felt instead was silence, the absence of the noise that had been inside him for years. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. You can forgive and still choose never to invite someone back into your life. It does not mean trust is restored. Trust must be rebuilt separately, and often cannot be rebuilt at all. Forgiveness is about reclaiming your inner space, sweeping out the lingering presence of those who have no right to live their rent free. There is a kind of courage in forgiveness that few recognize. Anger is easy. It gives you the illusion of power. To stay angry requires no effort beyond holding on. But to forgive is to let go, to release your grip on the rope, even though your hands have become so accustomed to holding it. It feels at first like you are falling, like you are giving up the only weapon you had left. Yet in time you see that the rope was never holding the other person. It was holding you. And here is a truth worth remembering. Some people will never apologize. Some will never acknowledge the harm they caused, and some may not even believe they caused it at all. If your healing depends on their repentance, you have handed them the keys to your freedom. Forgiveness is taking those keys back. It is saying, "I do not need your permission to be free of you." There will be times when the hurt rises again, when the old wound aches unexpectedly. Forgiveness is not a one-time act, but an ongoing practice. You may need to remind yourself again and again that you have set down the stone, that you have chosen not to carry it. Some days you will do this with ease, other days the weight will tempt you back. But each time you renew the choice, the grip of the past loosens a little more. In the end, forgiveness is less about the one who harmed you and more about the life you want to live. It is about deciding that you will not spend another moment chained to the cruelty of someone else's choice. You do not forgive to make peace with them. You forgive to make peace with yourself, and in that peace you discover that the wound may remain, but it no longer defines you. The shadow fades, the knot unties, and you walk forward unburdened, not because they deserved it, but because you did. When someone has wounded you deeply, they leave more than just a scar. They leave a shape in the very architecture of your identity. For a time, it may feel as though every room in your inner house has been built around that absence, that betrayal, that moment when your life was split into before and after. You may not even realize it, but you begin to speak of yourself through the lens of that wound. I am the one who was abandoned. I am the one they betrayed. I am the one they chose to hurt. It becomes a silent title you carry, a hidden name stitched beneath your skin. This identity is seductive in its familiarity. Pain, after all, has a strange way of making us feel grounded, as if the wound, while terrible, is at least something certain in a world of uncertainty. But to remain, there is to build your house on a foundation that will always smell faintly of smoke. You cannot truly forget someone who hurt you if you keep allowing them to define who you are. Their choices do not deserve to be the cornerstone of your selfhood. To move beyond them, you must dare to rewrite your story. This is not about pretending the wound never happened. That would be denial, not growth. It is about refusing to let the hurt be the central chapter of your life. The past can remain in your book, but it does not have to be the plot that drives every page. You must take the pen back from the hands of the past and write yourself into a new narrative. The question becomes, who am I beyond this wound? The answer will not arrive fully formed. It is something you must uncover slowly, the way a sculptor chips away at stone to find the figure hidden inside. Begin by creating moments that have nothing to do with them, moments so alive with their own color and texture that the old memories begin to fade into the background. Visit a place they were never part of. Learn a skill they never saw in you. Meet people who know nothing of your history, who see you not as someone recovering from anything, but simply as you. A friend of mine once went through a devastating divorce. For years after, she described herself as the woman whose husband left her for someone else. It was the way she introduced her own story, as though everything worth knowing about her could be traced back to that betrayal. One day, while speaking to a group of strangers in a pottery class she had signed up for on a whim, she realized no one there knew about her past. They knew her only as the woman sitting at the wheel, shaping clay with her hands, laughing at her own clumsy attempts. She later told me it was in that moment she felt the chains of her old identity loosen. The divorce was still real, still a fact of her life, but it was no longer the banner she lived under. She was free to be something more. There is something powerful in setting new goals that belong only to you. When you are pursuing a dream that has no shadow of the past over it, you create a space within yourself where the old pain cannot live. It is not about distraction. Distraction fades when the mind grows quiet, but about building a life so rich and textured that the wound becomes only one thread in a vast tapestry. The psyche is like a garden. If you allow it to remain barren after the storm, the soil will hold only the memory of what was lost. But if you plant new seeds, even small ones, the landscape will change. Each new experience is a root anchoring you to the present. Each achievement a branch reaching toward a future that no longer bends toward the person who hurt you. This transformation does not mean erasing the past. It means outgrowing it. You may still remember the hurt, but it will no longer be the frame through which you see yourself. You will find yourself saying, I am the one who built a business from nothing, or I am the one who traveled alone across the world, or I am the one who learned to love again. These new chapters will not cancel out the old one, but they will put it in its rightful place, a single part of a far greater story. There is a subtle danger in staying too long in the identity of the wounded. It invites you to keep seeking validation for the pain rather than transformation from it. The world will sympathize, and sympathy can feel warm, but it is not the same as freedom. Freedom comes when you no longer need to introduce yourself by your injury, when you can live days, weeks, months without even thinking of them, not because you forced yourself to forget, but because your life has become too full to hold the memory so tightly. Over time, as you pursue these new experiences, something remarkable happens. The space they once occupied inside you is naturally replaced. There is no grand act of erasure, no violent tearing out of the past. Instead, it is like a room filling slowly with light until the shadows no longer dominate its corners. One day you may even think of them and feel nothing, not hatred, not longing, not even sadness, just the quiet recognition that they are a part of your history, and nothing more. This is not the work of days, but of seasons. It is the slow weaving of a new identity that belongs entirely to you. The person who hurt you may have shaped a chapter of your life, but you are the author. You hold the pen, and as long as you keep writing, their presence will grow smaller on the page until they are no longer the reason your story matters at all. Forgetting someone who hurt you is not an overnight act. It is a series of choices to accept, to stop feeding the pain, to find meaning, to forgive, and to rebuild. The past may remain as a quiet echo, but it will no longer own you, and one day, without even realizing it, you'll wake up, and they will simply be a chapter you no longer feel the need to read again.